A Trump bump for real estate? According to brokerage firm Marcus and Millichap, the top 10 cities poised for growth are all in red states that Donald Trump won in the 2016 election. Joining us now is Marcus and Millichap CEO Hussam Naji. Great to see you, Hussam. First, the findings. The top 10 cities for growth are Indianapolis, St. Louis, Kansas City, San Antonio, Columbus, Houston, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, Louisville, and Cleveland. There you go. You see them on the map. They're also in kind of the central to eastern part of the country. Do you think it's a coincidence that these particular cities are in states that went red in 2016?
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the program. The answer is a little bit of a mix. In some cases, it's been a case of catching up finally to a recovery that began for many other cities earlier. And in some of the cases that we're tracking now, we're seeing much more optimism regarding job growth, much more efforts to obviously keep jobs here in the United States, which are very positive for the economy. And the general response to the president's orientation toward growth has been very much applauded by the real estate community. The expectation of extending this economic expansion, we're now in year 7. The average expansion lasts around 5 years. So there was a lot of concern going into the election about the durability of this expansion. And the president's growth orientation has given the real estate market a lot of confidence that that would happen through tax reform and growth measures that he's been talking about. The combination of that long-term optimism, though, has now been met with some short-term pause because of the fact that interest rates have spiked in the fourth quarter. And there's a wait and see generally in the real estate community about how the tax reform, economic stimuli, particularly infrastructure spending, and lowering of regulations will actually play out. Until those things become more clear, this wait and see is really dragging the market down at this point.
Hussam, it's Kevin Kelly. We're looking at all these cities, and they're in red states, and I think one of the things to take away, too, is it seems like the states and the municipalities are implementing policies that are attracting businesses as well as making it more affordable. What policies are you seeing that they're deploying that's separating them from their liberal counterparts?
Well, I think, first of all, there's plenty of growth cities outside of this particular list that we're talking about. For example, Dallas, Texas is the job leader in the country. Atlanta, Los Angeles, New York. There is broad growth across the country. These particular examples of growth in 2017 have to do with a private-public partnership that's occurred in many of the instances. But more importantly, besides this really focusing on specific companies, we're beginning to see the innovation and rejuvenation of a lot of older industries begin to take shape. If you look at, for example, what's happened in Detroit and the auto industry, longer term, if you look at what's happened in Philadelphia and its economic diversification, if you look at the difference between Houston, which has been much more energy dependent, versus Dallas, which has diversified its economy, the performance is clearly in the favor of Dallas over the past 2 or 3 years when energy prices fell. So it's a combination of diversification, public-private partnership, and creating catalysts for job creation.
Hussam, Mike Block here. In the public REIT markets, there's been a lot of pressure on some of these shopping mall REITs and some of these retailer REITs in general. What do you see as the future for this sector, given how beaten it up is in the public markets? What's the silver lining in the clouds here?
Well, REITs in general have performed very well. They are sensitive to interest rates, so when you begin a cycle of rising interest rates, some concerns do play into the REIT market. But the occupancy levels across all forms of real estate, particularly among REITs, have been very healthy. Retail is receiving some additional concerns because a lot of headlines about department stores closing locations and so on. And it's very much overstated. If you look at retail in general, brick and mortar retailing is surprisingly strong because over the past 5-6 years, we've seen virtually no speculative construction of a lot of retail. That's given the market a lot of time to absorb the excess space and actually perform well. And also, if you take a look at the most successful retailers, they have a combined strategy of e-commerce as well as brick and mortar. And so the reinvention of retail has actually been quite strong, and it's been the dark horse that's performed much better than expected.
Hassam, Kirsten Hagland here. With a lot of these cities that we talked about so far as being major growth cities, a lot of young people, too, are staying closer to home rather than moving out to the coast and really populating these downtowns, and we're seeing that rejuvenation. Is that something you see as a key factor here, and are you optimistic about that movement really spreading to other cities as well?
That's a great point. The revitalization of urban areas has been a key factor in places like Denver, in places like Seattle, places like Portland, Oregon, really all over the country. And millennials are very much attracted to a live-work kind of an environment where you don't have to drive and you have access to the amenities of an urban market, as do retiring baby boomers and empty nesters, a lot of whom are actually renting very high-end apartments that's being built over the past 5 years or so in urban areas. That's a huge draw to this type of audience, and some of these cities are beginning to realize that and take advantage of it. Although I think in most of these examples there is a lot to be done further, especially, as I mentioned before, the public-private partnership, tax incentives to attract jobs and therefore attract people.
Hassam, it was great to see you. Thank you for all the insight. Hassam Najji, thank you again.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Sure thing.